The sound of shattering crystal was the only warning. Then came the red dot, dancing like a phantom across the crisp white tablecloth, settling squarely on the chest of the man in the charcoal suit. Most people in the restaurant froze, paralyzed by the sudden violence in the air. But she didn't. She moved before she thought. The tray of champagne flutes crashed to the floor. "Get down!" she screamed, her voice tearing through the ambient jazz. She lunged, throwing her body across the table just as the window exploded inward. The deafening crack of a sniper rifle echoed off the marble walls, followed instantly by the wet thud of a bullet hitting flesh, but not the flesh it was intended for. As chaos erupted and screams filled the room, the most feared man in Chicago looked down in horror at the waitress bleeding out in his lap. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Vivaldi's, one of the most exclusive restaurants in Chicago's River North district. Inside, the air smelled of truffle oil, expensive cologne, and old money. For Sarah Mitchell, however, it smelled like exhaustion. She adjusted the waist of her black uniform trousers, wincing slightly. Her feet throbbed in her non-slip shoes. It was a Tuesday, usually a slow night, but the storm had driven the wealthy elite indoors, seeking shelter and scotch. Sarah wasn't supposed to be working this section. The gold section, as the staff called it, was reserved for the high rollers, politicians, tech moguls, and people who preferred their receipts unprinted. But reckless scheduling by the manager, a frantic man named Gary, meant Sarah was covering for a sick colleague. "Table 4 is yours," Gary hissed, shoving a leather-bound wine list into her hands. "Don't mess it up. That's Dominic Moretti." The name sent a chill through the kitchen staff. Even Sarah, who kept her head down and tried to ignore the city's darker gossip, knew the name. Dominic Moretti wasn't just a businessman. He was the head of the Moretti crime family, an organization that the FBI had been trying to dismantle since the days of Al Capone. Sarah took a deep breath, smoothing her apron. She walked onto the floor, dodging a busboy carrying a tower of dirty plates. Table 4 was tucked away in a private alcove, shielded by heavy velvet curtains that had been partially drawn back. 3 men sat there. 2 were massive, their necks thick with muscle, eyes scanning the room like radar. In the center sat Dominic Moretti. He was younger than the papers made him look, maybe 32. He wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than Sarah's entire year of tuition at the University of Illinois. His dark hair was slicked back, and his eyes were the color of steel, currently focused on a file folder open on the table. "Good evening, gentlemen," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "My name is Sarah, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you off with something from the bar?" Dominic didn't look up. He waved a hand dismissively. One of the bodyguards, a man with a jagged scar running down his jaw, spoke up. "Macallan 25, neat, for everyone, and leave the bottle." "Of course," Sarah said. She turned to leave, but something caught her eye. Dominic had closed the folder. On the cover, stamped in red ink, was a logo she recognized. Kruger Logistics. It was a shipping company down by the Navy Pier. Her father had worked there before his accident. It was a mundane detail, but it humanized the terrifying figure in front of her. When she returned with the whiskey and the crystal glasses, the mood at the table had shifted. It was tense. Dominic was leaning forward, whispering something to the scarred bodyguard. "Castillo is getting bold," Dominic murmured, his voice a low baritone that vibrated with suppressed anger. "If he thinks he can move product through O'Hare without my knowing—" "We handle it tonight, boss," the bodyguard asked. "No, not tonight. Tonight we celebrate the merger." Dominic finally looked up. His gaze landed on Sarah as she poured the amber liquid. For a second, the steel in his eyes softened. He looked tired. Thank you, Sarah. It was the first time he'd used her name. It was the first time he'd looked at her as a person, not a fixture of the restaurant. You're welcome, Mr. Moretti, she replied softly. She retreated to the server station, her hands shaking slightly. She needed this shift to end. She needed to get back to her studio apartment in Rogers Park and study for her nursing finals. 20 minutes passed. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the glass like a warning. Sarah was at the POS terminal, punching in an order for table 7, when she felt a strange shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't a sound. It was a visual anomaly. Across the street, on the roof of the parking garage adjacent to the merchandise mart, a flicker of light caught her eye. It was distinct against the grey gloom of the storm. She looked toward table 4. Dominic was laughing now, leaning back in his chair, a glass of whiskey raised in a toast. Then she saw it. A tiny red dot, laser-focused, sliding across the white linen tablecloth. It moved fast, climbing up Dominic's chest, aiming for his heart. Sarah didn't think about her nursing exam. She didn't think about her student loans. She didn't think about the fact that this man was a criminal. She dropped the tray she was holding. "Get down!" The scream tore out of her throat, raw and terrified. She sprinted the 15 feet between the station and the table. Dominic turned, confusion clouding his features. He was too slow. The bodyguards were reaching for their jackets, but they were too slow. Sarah launched herself. She collided with Dominic just as the glass wall of the restaurant shattered into a million diamonds. Crack! The sound was deafening. Sarah felt a sledgehammer hit her back, just below the shoulder blade. The force knocked the wind out of her, slamming her into Dominic's chest. They tumbled out of the chair, hitting the expensive carpet in a tangle of limbs. "Down! Stay down!" the scarred bodyguard roared, drawing a Glock 19 and overturning the heavy oak table for cover. Dominic was on his back, Sarah draped over him. He blinked, shaking glass from his hair. What the hell? Then he saw the blood. It wasn't his. It was pouring from the woman on top of him, soaking through her white uniform shirt, turning it a deep, terrifying crimson. Her eyes were wide, shock dilating her pupils. "You," Dominic stammered, his hands hovering over her wound. "You jumped!" Sarah tried to speak, but only a gurgle of air came out. The pain hadn't hit yet, just a cold numbness spreading through her limbs. She looked at Dominic, her vision blurring. "Did I?" she whispered, blood bubbling at the corner of her lips. "Did I save the whiskey?" Then darkness took her. "Don't you die on me. Do not die on me." Dominic Moretti was not a man who panicked. He had negotiated hostage exchanges in Bogotá and stared down federal prosecutors without blinking. But as he pressed his bespoke silk handkerchief against the hole in the waitress's back, his hands were trembling. "Boss, we have to move," the bodyguard, whose name was Lucas, shouted over the screams of the other patrons. "Second shooter could be repositioning." "Call the car," Dominic roared, his voice cracking. "Forget the ambulance, they'll take too long. Bring the Mercedes around the back." He scooped Sarah up in his arms. She was impossibly light, her head lolled back, her blonde ponytail swinging limply. The blood was hot and sticky on his hands, ruining his cuffs, ruining his suit. But he didn't care. He kicked open the kitchen doors, startling the chefs who were cowering behind the stainless steel counters. He carried her out into the alleyway, where the rain was coming down in sheets. A sleek black Mercedes S-Class screeched to a halt, the back door flying open. "Northwestern Memorial," Dominic barked as he slid into the back seat, cradling Sarah against his chest. "Go! Drive like hell!" The driver, a stoic man named Frank, floored it. The car fishtailed slightly on the wet asphalt before gripping the road and tearing down Wacker Drive. In the back seat, the atmosphere was suffocating. Dominic looked down at Sarah. Her face was pale, almost translucent in the passing streetlights. "Apply pressure," he muttered to himself, pressing harder on the wound. She groaned, a low, pained sound that twisted a knife in his gut. "Why did you do it?" he whispered to her unconscious form. "You don't even know me." He pulled out his phone, dialing a number with bloody fingers. "Dr. Aris, meet me at the ER entrance. Now. Gunshot wound. Female. Upper thoracic. I don't care if you're in surgery. Get out of it. If she dies, Aris, I'm burning the hospital down." He hung up and tossed the phone onto the leather seat. He looked at the name tag pinned to her blood-soaked apron. Sarah. He knew everything about everyone in Chicago who mattered. He knew the aldermen, the judges, the union leaders. He didn't know Sarah. She was a civilian, a normie. In his world, civilians were background noise. They were the people you protected by existing in the shadows, or the people you exploited. They weren't the people who took bullets for you. The car screeched into the ambulance bay of the hospital. Before the vehicle had even fully stopped, Dominic kicked the door open. A team of doctors and nurses was already waiting, looking terrified. Dr. Orris, a balding man with thick glasses, ran forward with a gurney. "Status?" Aris demanded, his professional demeanor struggling against his fear of the man shouting orders. "Single shot. Upper back. Exit wound." Dominic checked quickly. "No exit wound. The bullet is still inside." They transferred her to the gurney. As they rushed her through the double doors, a security guard stepped forward to stop Dominic. "Sir, you can't go past this point." Lucas, the bodyguard, stepped in front of the guard, simply shaking his head. The guard backed down. Dominic followed them as far as the operating theatre doors. The bright lights of the hallway reflected off the blood on his face. He watched as they cut away her uniform, revealing the pale skin marred by the ugly, dark hole. He saw them intubate her. Then the doors swung shut, leaving him in the sterile silence of the hallway. He sank onto a plastic bench, his adrenaline crashing. He looked at his hands. They were stained red. "Lucas," Dominic said, his voice deadly quiet. "Yeah, boss." "Find out who took the shot. We're on it. Ballistics will take time, but—" "I don't want ballistics." Dominic stood up, the predator returning to his eyes. "I want names. I want to know who was on that roof. And I want to know everything about Sarah Mitchell. Who she is, where she lives, who her family is. Everything. Consider it done." Dominic paced the hallway. Every minute felt like an hour. He shouldn't be here. He was a target. Sitting in a public hospital was suicide. But he couldn't leave. He felt a strange, heavy tether connecting him to the woman on the table. She had screamed before the shot. She had seen it. How? A trained assassin doesn't let a waitress see them, unless she wasn't just a waitress. Suspicion flared in his mind. Was it a setup? A way to infiltrate his inner circle? A pretty girl takes a flesh wound to gain his trust? He looked at the blood on his shirt again. No. That was too much blood for a setup. That was a kill shot she had intercepted. If she hadn't moved him, his head would have been on that table. 3 hours later, Dr. Aris emerged. He looked exhausted. He pulled off his surgical cap. Dominic was in front of him in a second. "Well, she's stable," Aris said. Dominic let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. The bullet missed her spine by 2 millimeters. It punctured her lung and nicked the subclavian artery. We had to repair the vessel and remove the lower lobe of her left lung. She's lost a lot of blood, Dominic. It's a miracle she's alive. Will she recover? With time and rest. But she needs to be in the ICU. No, Dominic said instantly. Dominic, she needs constant monitoring. She's not staying here. If someone tried to kill me, they might try to finish the job, and they might go through her to get to me, or they might think she saw something. She's a loose end to them now. You can't move her, Aris argued. I can and I will. Prep her for transport. I'm taking her to the lake house. That is insane. She could bleed out on the way. Then you're coming with us, Dominic said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Pack your bags, Doc. You're making a house call. Consciousness returned to Sarah in fragments. First, there was the smell. It didn't smell like a hospital. It smelled of lavender and fresh rain. Then, the feeling of the sheets. They were silk, cool and incredibly soft against her skin. She tried to open her eyes, but her eyelids felt like lead. She tried to move, and a sharp, hot lance of pain shot through her chest, making her gasp. Easy, a deep voice said from somewhere to her right. Don't move. She forced her eyes open. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of a fireplace. This wasn't her apartment. It wasn't a hospital room. It looked like a bedroom from a period drama. High ceilings, mahogany furniture, heavy drapes covering the windows. She turned her head slowly. Sitting in a leather armchair next to the bed was Dominic Moretti. He looked different. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore a black cashmere sweater and dark jeans. He looked clean, but his eyes were rimmed with red, as if he hadn't slept. Where? Her voice was a dry croak. Dominic leaned forward, holding a glass of water with a straw to her lips. Drink. Slowly. She sipped. The water was cold and heavenly. You're in Lake Geneva, Dominic said, placing the glass back on the nightstand. At my private estate. You've been unconscious for 3 days. 3 days? Panic spiked in her chest. My job. I missed my shift. My finals. Forget the job, Dominic said. And I've already contacted the Dean of Nursing at your university. You've been granted a medical deferral for your exams. You can take them next semester. Sarah stared at him. You called my dean? I can be very persuasive. Sarah tried to sit up again, wincing. Why am I here? I should be in a hospital. You're safer here, Dominic said, his face hardening. The person who shot at us, we haven't found him yet. Until we do, you are a witness, and you are under my protection. Sarah looked around the opulent room. It felt less like a sanctuary and more like a fortress. I need to go home. You can't. Am I a prisoner? Dominic paused. He stood up and walked to the window, peering out through the crack in the curtains. You are a guest who cannot leave, for your own survival. He turned back to her. Sarah, why did you scream? The question hung in the air. What? In the restaurant, you screamed, "Get down," before the glass broke. You moved before the shot was fired. How did you know? Sarah swallowed. The memory was hazy, but the instinct was sharp. I saw the dot. The laser? Yes. And the reflection. What reflection? On the building across the street, the parking garage, I saw a flash of light, a lens flare. My dad, he used to hunt. He taught me to look for the glint of a scope. Dominic studied her. It was a plausible story, but his paranoia ran deep. Your file says your father was a warehouse worker. He was, Sarah said defensively. He was also a Marine before that. He taught me situational awareness. Is that a crime? No, Dominic said softly. It saved my life. He walked back to the chair and sat down, closer this time. You took a bullet for me, Sarah. That creates a debt. A very large debt. I didn't do it for a debt, she said, her voice weak but firm. I did it because I didn't want to watch a man die while I was pouring whiskey. Most people would have run. I'm not most people. There was a knock at the door. The door opened, and a woman in a maid's uniform entered, carrying a tray of medical supplies. Behind her was Dr. Aris. "Time for your checkup, Miss Mitchell," Aris said, looking nervous under Dominic's watchful eye. "I'll leave you to it," Dominic said. He stood up. Before he left, he rested his hand on the footboard of the bed. "Rest, Sarah. Ask for anything you want. But do not try to leave the grounds. The perimeter is patrolled by men with dogs, and they aren't as friendly as I am." He walked out, closing the heavy oak door with a solid thud. Sarah let out a breath. She was alive. She was in a mansion, and she was trapped by the most dangerous man in Chicago. As Dr. Aris changed her bandages, Sarah hissed in pain. "He's obsessive, you know," the doctor whispered, glancing at the door. "Who?" "Moretti. He hasn't left this room in 3 days except to shower." He sat in that chair and watched the monitors. Sarah felt a strange flutter in her stomach. Why? Guilt? "Maybe," Aris said, taping down the gauze. "Or maybe he's just fascinated. Dominic deals with people who want to take from him. I don't think he knows how to handle someone who gave him something." Later that night, Sarah couldn't sleep. The pain meds made her groggy, but her mind was racing. She needed to use the bathroom. She slowly swung her legs over the side of the bed. The room spun. She gritted her teeth and stood up, clutching the IV pole for support. She made it to the bathroom attached to the suite. It was made of marble and gold. After she washed her face, staring at her pale reflection, she opened the door to head back to bed. She heard voices in the hallway. She cracked the bedroom door open just a sliver. Dominic was standing in the corridor, talking to Lucas. "We found the shooter's nest," Lucas was saying. "Standard setup, but we found something else." "What?" Dominic asked. "A cigarette butt. DNA came back. It's a partial match." "To who?" "It's familial, boss. The DNA is related to someone in the database." "Who, Lucas?" Lucas lowered his voice, but in the quiet hallway, Sarah could still hear it. "It's related to the Cray family. But specifically, it's a match for a sibling of Victor Cray." Dominic went silent. "Victor doesn't have a sibling. He's an only child." "That's what the records say," Lucas said. "But the DNA doesn't lie. Whoever pulled that trigger shares blood with your rival." Dominic ran a hand through his hair. "If Cray is coming for me, he's breaking the truce of 98. This is war." "There's more," Lucas hesitated. "We ran a deeper background on the girl. Sarah." Sarah's breath hitched. She leaned closer to the crack in the door. "And?" "Her father, the Marine, he didn't just work for Kruger Logistics. Before that, way back, he was a driver for your father. Sal Moretti." Dominic froze. "My father's driver? The one who died in the car bomb?" "No, the one who survived. The one who disappeared." Dominic turned and looked straight at the door where Sarah was hiding. She pulled back instantly, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Keep her close." Dominic's voice drifted through the wood, colder than before. "If she's the daughter of the man who betrayed my father, she didn't save me. She's here to finish what her father started." Sarah stumbled back toward the bed, her mind reeling. Her father hadn't betrayed anyone. He was a good man. What were they talking about? She climbed back under the covers, shivering. She had saved his life, and now he thought she was an assassin. The golden cage had just become a death trap. The morning sun filtered through the heavy velvet drapes, casting long, dust-mote-filled beams across the Persian rug. Sarah was awake long before Dominic entered the room. She had spent the night staring at the ornate ceiling, the conversation she'd overheard playing on a loop in her mind. Daughter of the man who betrayed my father. When the door finally opened, the air in the room shifted. It became heavier, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on Sarah's arms stand up. Dominic walked in, not with a breakfast tray or a doctor, but with a manila folder. He didn't sit in the armchair. He stood at the foot of the bed, looming like a judge ready to pass a sentence. "Good morning," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands beneath the duvet. Dominic didn't return the greeting. He tossed the folder onto the bed. It slid across the silk sheets and hit her legs. "Tell me about your father, Sarah." Sarah looked at the folder, then up at him. His face was a mask of indifference, but his eyes were burning. "I told you, he worked in logistics. He was a Marine. And before that? I don't know. I was a baby." "He was a driver," Dominic said, his voice dropping an octave. "For the Moretti family, specifically for my father, Salvatore Moretti. 1998. Does that year ring a bell? No, it should. It was the year my father was killed." Dominic walked around the side of the bed, moving with the predatory grace of a panther circling injured prey. A car bomb. The driver was supposed to be in the car, but he wasn't. He stepped out 2 minutes before the explosion to make a call. My father burned to death. The driver vanished. His name was Thomas Mitchell. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. My father. My father's name was Thomas, but he wasn't a traitor. He was the most loyal man I knew. Loyalty is a commodity, Sarah. It can be bought. Dominic leaned down, placing his hands on the mattress on either side of her hips, trapping her. "Did he send you? Did he tell you to wait for the right moment, to finish what he started?" "He's dead!" Sarah shouted, the anger overriding the fear. She tried to sit up, ignoring the searing pain in her shoulder. "He died 6 years ago. Drunk driving accident. He drove his truck off a bridge." Dominic paused, searching her face for a lie. "Convenient." "It wasn't convenient. It destroyed my life." Tears pricked her eyes, hot and angry. And he wasn't a drunk. He hadn't touched a drop of alcohol in 10 years. I always knew something was wrong about that night. He called me. He called me an hour before he died. He sounded scared. He said, "Sarah, if anything happens to me, look in the lining of the old tackle box." Dominic pulled back slightly. "The tackle box?" "I never looked," Sarah whispered, her energy fading. "I was 19. I was grieving. I sold his stuff. I just wanted to forget." Dominic stared at her for a long, agonizing minute. He was a human lie detector, trained to spot the twitch of a muscle, the shift of a gaze. He saw nothing but raw, unadulterated grief. He straightened up, running a hand over his jaw. "If you are lying to me, Sarah, there is no place on this earth you will be able to hide." "And if I'm telling the truth," she countered, her blue eyes locking with his steel-grey ones, "then you're treating the person who saved your life like a criminal." The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, Dominic sighed. It was a sound of surrender, not of the war, but of the battle. "Where is this tackle box now?" "I told you, I sold it, to a pawn shop on Halstead, years ago." Dominic pulled out his phone. He didn't dial, he just spoke into it, seemingly to the air. "Lucas, pawn shop on Halstead. Records from 6 years ago. Items sold by Sarah Mitchell or Thomas Mitchell. Find it. Buy it back. I don't care what it costs." He put the phone away and looked back at her. The hostility had receded, replaced by a confused intensity. "You should eat. You need your strength." "I'm not hungry." "I didn't ask if you were hungry." Dominic walked to the door and signaled. The maid scurried in with a tray of food, eggs, fruit, toast. Dominic took the tray from her and set it on the nightstand. He sat in the chair again. "Eat. Please." The please caught her off guard. It was rough, unused to being spoken. Sarah reached for the toast with her good hand. She took a bite, watching him. "Why do you care? If you think I'm an enemy, why didn't you just let me die in the hospital?" Dominic looked at the fire crackling in the hearth. "Because you didn't hesitate. I've watched the security footage from the restaurant 100 times. You saw the dot and you moved. You didn't check for an exit. You didn't look for cover. You covered me. That kind of instinct. It can't be faked. It contradicts everything I know about self-preservation." He turned his gaze back to her. "It scares me, Sarah, because I don't understand it. And I understand everything. Maybe you just aren't used to people doing things for free," she said softly. "In my world, nothing is free. Everything has a price tag. Usually it's blood." He reached out, his hand hovering near her face. For a second, she thought he was going to touch her cheek. His fingers brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His touch was electric, sending a jolt straight to her core. "Rest," he said abruptly, pulling his hand back as if he had been burned. "We have a long night ahead." "Why? What happens tonight?" "Tonight," Dominic said, his eyes darkening. "We find out if your father was a traitor or a victim. Lucas found the shop owner. He kept the box. He's a hoarder. We're having it flown here by helicopter." Sarah's heart hammered. The past she had buried was coming to the surface, and it was being dug up by the King of Chicago. The helicopter arrived at dusk, the thwop, thwop, thwop of its rotors shaking the window panes of the estate. Sarah was sitting up in bed, propped by pillows, feeling stronger than she had in days. Dr. Aris had removed the drainage tube from her chest that afternoon, and breathing was easier. Dominic entered the room carrying a rusted, olive-green metal box. It smelled of oil and old tobacco. "Is this it?" he asked, placing it on the bed. Sarah nodded, her throat tight. "Yes, that's his. Do you want to open it, or should I?" "You do it," she whispered. Dominic unlatched the rusty clasp. It creaked open. Inside, there were tangles of fishing line, rusted hooks, and a few bobbers. It looked like junk, but Dominic didn't look at the contents. He looked at the construction. He ran his fingers along the bottom of the box. "False bottom," he muttered. He pulled a small knife from his pocket and pried up the metal lining. Underneath lay a single, yellowed envelope and a microcassette tape. Dominic picked up the envelope. It was addressed to "Sarah, for when you're older." He handed it to her. Sarah's hands shook as she tore it open. The letter was short, written in her father's jagged scrawl. "Sarah, if you're reading this, they found me. I've been running for 18 years, but you can't run from the Morettis forever. I need you to know the truth. I didn't kill Sal. I tried to save him. The bomb wasn't under the car. It was in the briefcase Sal was carrying. His own lieutenant, Gabriel Gabe Russo, gave it to him. I saw Gabe rig it. I tried to warn Sal, but Gabe put a gun to my head. He told me if I didn't drive away, he'd kill you and your mother. I chose you. I've always chosen you. I recorded everything Gabe said that night on my dictaphone. It's on the tape. Take it to the police. I love you, Bear." Sarah finished reading, tears streaming down her face. She handed the letter to Dominic. He read it in silence. His face went pale, then a terrifying shade of red. The veins in his neck bulged. "Gabe," he whispered. "Uncle Gabe." "Who is he?" Sarah asked. "He's my godfather." Dominic spat the words out. "He's the man who raised me after my father died. He's the man running my security right now." Dominic looked at the microcassette tape in the box. "If this tape confirms it..." "It does," Sarah said. "My dad wouldn't lie in a death note." Dominic stood up, pacing the room like a caged animal. Gabe is the only one who knew we were at Vivaldi's that night. He made the reservation, and he knows we're here. He set up the safe house. The realization hit them both at the same time. The silence of the lake house was suddenly oppressive. "We have to leave," Dominic said, grabbing his jacket. "Now." "Why?" "Because if Gabe killed my father to take power and failed to kill me at the restaurant, he knows I'm still alive. And if he knows we're here..." Boom! The front door of the mansion downstairs didn't just open, it exploded. The floor beneath them shook, knocking the lamp off the bedside table. Alarms started blaring, a high-pitched wail that cut through the night. "They're here," Dominic snarled. He drew a gun from the back of his waistband, a sleek, custom 1911. He moved to the bed, grabbing Sarah's arm. "Can you walk?" "I have to," she gritted out. She swung her legs out, biting her lip as pain flared in her chest. "Lucas!" Dominic shouted into his comms earpiece. "Status!" Static. Then a wet, gurgling sound. "Boss? Northgate breached, heavily armed. It's the Krays. And our guys. They're letting them in." The line went dead. "Your men are turning on you?" Sarah asked, terror seizing her. "Not all of them. Just the ones loyal to Gabe. We need to move." Dominic kicked open the balcony door. The cold night air rushed in. "We can't go downstairs. It's a kill box." "The balcony?" Sarah looked down. It was a 20-foot drop to the garden terrace. "Trust me." Dominic holstered his gun and scooped her up, mindful of her wound. "Hold on tight." He vaulted over the railing. They fell, the wind rushing past them. Dominic took the impact, rolling on the grass and shielding Sarah with his body. He groaned but was up in a second, pulling her to her feet. "Run towards the boathouse," he ordered. Gunfire erupted from the house windows above them. Bullets chewed up the manicured lawn around their feet. Thwip, thwip, thwip. Suppressed fire. These were professionals. Sarah ran. Her lungs burned. Her incision felt like it was tearing open, but adrenaline was a powerful drug. She stumbled, and Dominic was there, his hand gripping hers, pulling her forward. They reached the edge of the woods bordering the lake. The boathouse was 50 yards away. "Wait!" Sarah gasped, pulling him back behind a large oak tree. "Look!" By the boathouse, 3 men were waiting. They wore tactical gear and night vision goggles. They weren't Moretti soldiers. They were mercenaries. "They cut off the escape route," Dominic cursed. "Smart." "We can't go back. We can't go forward," Sarah whispered. "What do we do?" Dominic looked at her. In the moonlight, with chaos erupting around them, he looked strangely calm. "We hunt." "What?" "I can take 2 of them. I need a distraction for the 3rd. He pressed his spare gun, a small revolver, into her hand. "Do you know how to use this?" "My dad taught me," she said, her hands trembling as she gripped the cold steel. "Point and squeeze. Don't hesitate. If they see you, they will kill you." Dominic vanished into the shadows of the undergrowth. Sarah waited, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. She counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. She stepped out from behind the tree, raising the gun. She didn't aim at the men. She aimed at the fuel tank of the jet ski parked on the dock next to them. She fired. The bullet sparked against the metal. Nothing. She fired again. The tank ruptured. "Hey!" one of the mercenaries shouted, spinning around. Sarah fired a 3rd time. The spark met the fumes. K-boom! The jet ski exploded in a fireball that lit up the shoreline. The shockwave knocked the mercenaries off their feet. In the confusion, a shadow moved among them. Dominic. It was brutal and fast. 2 shots, 2 bodies hitting the wood. The 3rd mercenary scrambled for his rifle, but Dominic was on him, a knife flashing in the firelight. It was over in seconds. Dominic ran back to where Sarah was crouching. He looked at the burning wreckage, then at her. He was breathing hard, sweat and soot on his face. "You blew up my jet ski," he said, a wild grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You needed a distraction," she panted. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Sarah Mitchell," he said. The words came out before he could stop them. Sarah froze. The fire crackled behind them. Bullets were still flying from the main house. It was the worst possible moment, and yet, the perfect one. "Tell me that when we're not being shot at," she replied, grabbing his hand. "Fair enough." Dominic pulled her toward the remaining boat, a sleek wooden speedster. He cut the mooring lines. "Get in!" As the engine roared to life, and they sped away from the burning estate, skipping over the dark waves of Lake Geneva, Sarah looked back. The mansion was glowing against the night sky, overrun by enemies. They were alive. But they had nothing left. No safe house, no army, no resources. Just a rusty tackle box, a damning tape, and each other. "Where do we go?" Sarah shouted over the wind. Dominic steered the boat toward the center of the lake, his face grim. "We go to the one place Gabe won't look, the one place he thinks I'm too proud to go." "Where?" "The south side," Dominic said. "We're going to the Lion's Den. We're going to see the only man who hates Gabe Rousseau as much as I do." "Who?" "Victor Cray." Sarah's jaw dropped. "The enemy? The man trying to kill you?" "The enemy of my enemy is my friend," Dominic said, throttling the engine. "Tonight we make a deal with the devil." The ride to the south side was harrowing. Dominic had ditched the boat at a marina in Burnham Harbour and hot-wired a rusted sedan. Sarah drove while Dominic bound his bleeding side with strips of his own shirt. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. But Sarah forced her eyes to stay open. They pulled up to the Iron Horse, a grimy industrial nightclub that served as Victor Cray's fortress. It was a stark contrast to Vivaldi's. Here, the music was heavy bass that rattled the car windows, and the men outside wore leather cuts, not Italian suits. "This is suicide," Sarah whispered, killing the engine. "It's the only play we have," Dominic replied, checking the magazine of his 1911. He had 7 rounds left. "Cray respects strength. If we walk in there with our heads held high, he'll listen. If we sneak in, he'll kill us." Dominic turned to her. "You stay in the car." "No," Sarah said, her voice shaking but firm. "I'm the proof. I'm the one with the tape. And if you die in there, I'm dead anyway. I'm coming with you." Dominic looked at her with a mixture of fear and pride. He nodded once. "Stay behind me." They walked to the entrance. 2 bouncers the size of vending machines stepped forward, hands going to their waistbands. "Tell Victor that Dominic Moretti is here," Dominic said, his voice carrying the authority of a king, even in a blood-stained T-shirt. "And tell him I brought him a gift." The bouncers exchanged a look. One of them spoke into a headset. A moment later, the steel doors groaned open. They were marched through the throbbing club, past gyrating dancers and clouded smoke, into a soundproof back room. The bass faded to a dull thrum. Sitting behind a metal desk was Victor Cray. He was a mountain of a man with silver hair and a face that looked like it had been chiseled out of granite. He was eating a steak. "Dominic Moretti," Cray said, not looking up from his meal. "You have some nerve coming here. I heard you were dead. My men said your house is burning." "Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated," Dominic said calmly. "And who is this?" Cray pointed a steak knife at Sarah. "The waitress? The one who ruined my shooter's aim? She's the reason we're both going to survive the night," Dominic said. Cray laughed, a dry, rasping sound. Give me one reason why I shouldn't put a bullet in your head right now and finish what my brother started." "Your brother didn't order the hit," Dominic said. The room went silent. Cray stopped chewing. He looked up, his eyes dangerous. "Careful, boy. You talk about my family. I'm not talking about your family. I'm talking about mine." Dominic stepped forward, placing the rusty tackle box on the desk. "We found this. It belonged to the driver who disappeared the night my father died. It contains a recording." "I don't care about your father," Cray spat. "You should, because the man who killed my father is the same man who convinced you to break the truce tonight. The same man who told you I was weak." Dominic leaned in. "Gabe Russo." Cray's eyes narrowed. "Gabe came to me yesterday. Said you were planning to move on my territory. Said he could open the gates for me if I took you out." "He lied," Sarah spoke up. Her voice was small in the large room, but it was clear. "He's playing both sides. He wants Dominic dead so he can take the Moretti Empire. And once he has it, do you think he'll share Chicago with you? He'll use Dominic's resources to wipe you out." Dominic opened the box and played the tape. The grainy voice of Sarah's father filled the room, narrating the betrayal, followed by the recorded voice of a younger Gabe Russo admitting to rigging the car bomb. "Sal is soft. He talks about peace. We need war to make money. We blow the car, we blame the Crays, and we take everything." The tape clicked off. Cray sat back, his face unreadable. He looked at Dominic, then at Sarah. "Gabe played us," Cray rumbled. "He used my brother's DNA. How?" "He likely stole a sample from a medical exam or a crime scene," Dominic said. "He planted it to ensure a war. If I had died at the restaurant, my men would have razed the South Side in retaliation. You and I would have killed each other, and Gabe would have been the last man standing, king of the ashes." Cray stood up. He was taller than Dominic. He walked around the desk and stood in front of them. "I hate you, Moretti," Cray said quietly. "I hated your father." "The feeling is mutual," Dominic replied, not flinching. "But," Cray picked up a heavy revolver from his desk, "I hate rats more." He checked the cylinder and snapped it shut. "Gabe Russo is holding a memorial for you at the Moretti Tower right now. He's rallying your captains to swear loyalty to him." Dominic's jaw tightened. "Then we're crashing the party." "We?" Cray grilled. "I'm not doing this for you. We do this together." Dominic extended his hand. "Tonight we kill the rat. Tomorrow we go back to hating each other." Cray looked at the hand. Then he gripped it. "Deal, but the waitress stays here." "No," Dominic and Sarah said in unison. "She's his weakness," Cray noted. "She's my strength," Dominic corrected. "And she's got better aim than half your men." Cray grunted. "Fine, let's go make a mess." The penthouse of the Moretti Tower offered a 360-degree view of the Chicago skyline, glittering like a sea of diamonds. Inside, the mood was somber but focused. 20 of the city's most powerful crime bosses sat around a long mahogany table. At the head sat Gabe Russo. He was a balding man with a kindly face that hid a viper's soul. He raised a glass of wine. "To Dominic," Gabe said, forcing a tear to glisten in his eye. "He was like a son to me, taken too soon by the savage animals of the South Side. But we will avenge him. Tonight, we strike back." "To Dominic," the captains murmured, drinking. The elevator doors at the far end of the room chimed. Gabe frowned. He hadn't invited anyone else. The doors slid open. Dominic Moretti stepped out. He was battered, his clothes torn, blood smeared on his cheek. But he looked more alive than anyone in the room. The glass fell from Gabe's hand, shattering on the floor. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Uncle Gabe," Dominic said, his voice echoing in the silent room. "Dom," Gabe stammered, his face draining of color. "You're alive. Praise God. We thought—" "You thought the hit squad at the lake house did their job," Dominic cut him off, walking slowly toward the table. Behind him, the elevator doors stayed open. Victor Cray walked out, flanked by Sarah and two of his enforcers. The captains at the table stood up in confusion, hands reaching for guns. "Sit down!" Dominic roared. The command was so powerful that half of them obeyed instinctively. "What is the meaning of this?" one of the captains asked. "Why is Cray here?" "Because we were both played," Dominic said, stopping at the foot of the table. "By him." He pointed a finger at Gabe. "He's lying!" Gabe shouted, panic edging into his voice. "He's been brainwashed. Cray has turned him." "I have the tape, Gabe," Dominic said softly. "The tape from Thomas Mitchell, the driver you framed, the driver you threatened to kill." Gabe's eyes darted around the room. He saw the doubt in the captains' faces. He saw the cold fury in Cray's eyes. He knew his house of cards was collapsing. "Kill them!" Gabe screamed to his personal guards. "Kill them all!" Gabe's guards drew their weapons, but Dominic was faster. He flipped the heavy mahogany table, sending plates and wine flying, creating a barricade. Gunfire erupted. The penthouse turned into a war zone. Glass shattered, wood splintered. Cray's men returned fire with shotguns, the boom deafening in the enclosed space. Dominic vaulted over the overturned table, moving through the chaos toward Gabe. Gabe was scrambling toward the private exit behind the bar. He fumbled with a keypad. "Dominic!" Sarah screamed. Dominic turned. One of Gabe's guards had flanked him, raising a submachine gun. Dominic was exposed. Bang! A single shot rang out, distinct from the automatic fire. The guard dropped, a hole in his chest. Dominic looked back. Sarah was standing near the elevator, the revolver smoking in her hands, her face pale but determined. She had saved him again. Dominic didn't waste the moment. He turned and tackled Gabe just as the older man got the door open. They crashed into the hallway. Gabe was older, but he fought with the desperation of a rat in a corner. He clawed at Dominic's eyes, kicking and screaming. He managed to pull a knife from his boot. He slashed at Dominic, cutting his forearm. Dominic roared in pain, but caught Gabe's wrist. He twisted it, hearing the bone snap. Gabe dropped the knife. Dominic hauled him up by his lapels and slammed him against the glass wall of the corridor. They were 40 stories up. "Why?" Dominic demanded, his face inches from the man who had raised him. "You were family." "I was a servant," Gabe spat, blood on his teeth. "Your father treated me like a dog. You treated me like a nanny. It was my turn. It was supposed to be mine." "It was never yours," Dominic said coldly. "And it never will be." Gabe laughed, a manic sound. "You can't kill me, Dom. You're not a killer. You're a businessman. You won't do it." Dominic looked at him. He thought of his father burning in that car. He thought of the bullet hole in Sarah's back. He thought of the years of lies. "You're right," Dominic said, releasing him. "I'm a businessman." Gabe slumped, relieved. "Smart boy. We can work this out. I have accounts." "But—" Dominic stepped back. "He isn't." Gabe looked up in confusion. Victor Cray was standing at the end of the hallway. He held a silenced pistol. "For the truce," Cray said. "Foot. One shot. Clean. Center of the forehead." Gabe Russo slid down the glass wall, dead before he hit the floor. Dominic didn't look back. He walked back into the penthouse. The shooting had stopped. The captains who had sided with Gabe were either dead or on their knees with their hands up. Sarah ran to him. Dominic caught her, burying his face in her neck. She smelled of gunpowder and rain, but to him, she smelled like home. "It's over," he whispered. "Is it?" she asked, pulling back to look at him. Dominic looked at the room. The captains were watching him with fear and awe. Cray was holstering his weapon. "This part is," Dominic said. He turned to the room. "Clear the bodies. We have work to do." 3 months later, Vivaldi's had reopened. The glass was replaced, the carpet cleaned, but table 4 was empty. Sarah sat at the bar, but she wasn't wearing a uniform. She wore an emerald green dress that hugged her curves, her hair cascading down her back in loose waves. She was studying a textbook, Advanced Trauma Nursing. The door opened and the air in the room shifted. Dominic Moretti walked in. He looked different, lighter. He walked straight to the bar. "I hear the nurse here gives excellent service," he said, leaning on the counter. Sarah smiled, closing her book. "She's expensive, and very exclusive. I can afford it." Dominic took her hand, kissing the knuckles. The scar on her shoulder had healed, but it would always be there. A mark of what they had survived. "Cray sent a gift," Dominic said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "For the wedding." "A bomb?" Sarah joked. "A bulletproof vest. For the baby." Sarah laughed, a free, happy sound. He's sentimental in his old age. Dominic's expression turned serious. "Are you sure about this, Sarah? You can still walk away. I can set you up anywhere in the world. You don't have to be part of this life." Sarah looked at him. She looked at the man who had burned down the world for her. She thought about the adrenaline, the fear, and the undeniable power of standing beside him. She leaned in, her lips brushing his ear. "I didn't take a bullet for you just to walk away, Dominic," she whispered. "Besides, someone has to watch your back. You have terrible situational awareness." Dominic smiled, the first true, unburdened smile he had worn in years. He signaled the bartender. "Macallan 25, he said. 2 glasses. And leave the bottle." As they toasted, the city lights twinkling outside, Dominic knew one thing for certain. He was still the King of Chicago. But for the first time in history, the king had a queen who was more dangerous than he was, and that was exactly how he liked it. What a ride. From a spilled tray of drinks to a showdown at the top of the skyline, Sarah and Dominic's story proves that sometimes love is the most dangerous weapon of all. It's a classic tale of betrayal, hidden identities, and the kind of loyalty you can't buy with money, only with blood. I hope you enjoyed this twisty mafia romance as much as I enjoyed telling it. It's rare to find a heroine who saves the hero not once, but twice. If you were on the edge of your seat when Sarah took that shot in the penthouse, or if you swooned when Dominic blew up his own jet ski just to save her, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this story with your friends who love a good mafia drama, and subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss out on our next heart-pounding story. Who should we write about next? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.